Ford Automobile Company has grown and developed, bringing fast cars to the market that are not available to everyone, of course. Clyde adored such cars. Since childhood, he cut through the wind in cars stolen by his brother. Therefore, he was not only a skilled driver but also a good racer. Add to that a powerful car and that's it, you're an elusive robber.
There were days when Clyde stole 4 cars and he specialized in stealing only the best, most powerful cars. One of them was a Ford the 5.8. He just flew. Clyde was driving 70 to 80 miles per hour, and law enforcement officers were dragging after him at a speed of only 35 miles.
In 1933, Bonnie and Clyde were joined by Ivan Barrow, nicknamed Buck, Clyde's brother, and his wife Blanche. A little before them, William Daniel Jones entered the gang. Now there were 5 of them. And the more of them became, the more attention they attracted to themselves. In the end, the newly created FBI drew attention to them. More precisely, their first director is J. Edgar Hoover. Only the Bureau could stop the robbers, because American laws did not allow the cops of one state to perform the duties on the territory of another. This is what the criminals used. Having committed a crime, for example in Texas, they fled to Oklahoma.
Despite the fact that Bonnie and Clyde's gang usually tried to escape from a shootout, they always carried a whole arsenal of weapons in the trunk of their car. They had not only rifle pistols, but also a Browning light machine gun.
If we count in general, then during the entire period of the group's activity, they managed to rob 12 banks, commit 13 murders and 5 kidnappings. The victims of the gang were either high-ranking officials in the banking spheres or law enforcement officers. In a word, they saw no boundaries in front of them. And when money was not enough, they came to Missouri, to the city of Joplin. A rather small place that was known among bootleggers and underground liquor dealers. Usually, they were the ones who most often arranged parties there or hid from law enforcement officers. Bonnie and Clyde's gang settled in this apartment. An ideal place to lie down. If it weren't for alcohol and debauchery. They caused such discontent among neighbors that they called law enforcement officers. The suspicion also arose due to the fact that the license plates of the car were Texas, not local. The patrol officers who came to the call thought that they would handcuff ordinary petty thieves. But no one expected that a heavy fire would be opened on the cops.
The first officer got out of the car and went to the garage door to prevent Clyde from closing it. Of course, he didn't know who was standing in front of them and what to expect. Clyde immediately opened fire with a shotgun, hitting him in the neck and shoulder. He was the first officer to be killed in that shootout.
From the windows of the house, the rest of the gang members also started shooting, killing another officer. When it became clear that help would soon come to law enforcement officers, the bandits quickly got into the car and fled. Chasing them was pointless, but they left something behind. Something that will forever turn their lives into hide and seek with cops. Bonnie, Clyde and company did not take their photos and left many fingerprints. At the same time, for the first time, America found out what these bandits really looked like. All these images were sent to newspapers, describing the robbers as an evil that must be stopped. But for simple, impoverished citizens, the robbers showed only a different way of life. Bonnie posed for the camera with a cigar in her teeth and revolvers, as if demonstrating that a woman's life may not be as boring as Americans used to believe. Instead of anger and hatred towards the killers, most Americans began to support them and sympathize with them. Immediately after the shootout, they fled the scene so quickly that they left not only photographs, but also clothes, jewelry and many weapons.
They appeared at a time when most Americans, one might say, needed them. They were like Romeo and Juliet in an innocent romance. A little in espionage, a little in drama. It was a time when the country suffered from a lack of entertainment.
For 3 months after the events in Joplin, the gang drove around America, only occasionally robbing shops and gas stations to get money to live. It was necessary to find a new place to wait out the police raids. The task is not easy, because their photos were posted in every hotel, motel, pub and restaurant. It was no longer possible to go unnoticed. The only option is to go to remote villages, where no one has heard of the notorious notoriety of robbers. And so they decided to do it. And they almost got there. If it weren't for the accident.
On June 10, 1933, on the outskirts of Texas, Clyde's incredible driving skills let him down. He lost control, flew off the road, and the car rolled into an abyss. A fire started. Before Bonnie was pulled out of the fire, her right leg was badly burned. Since then, everyone who has seen Bonnie with their own eyes remembers that she walked very badly on her own. It was sometimes worn by Clyde.
There was no point in running away. It was necessary to settle down and wait for Bonnie to recover. They settled in a small farm. The owner of the estate allowed him to live for a few days for a moderate fee. But he thought that only Clyde and Bonnie would be in the room. The rest of the gang members passed in secret. They were tracked down very quickly. The fact is that Clyde bought food for 5 people in a local store. Very suspicious, like a young couple. And besides, he stocked up on bandages and various drugs for his beloved. Then people began to suspect that it was not just a couple, but Clyde himself, who was trying to save Bonnie. They didn't have to wait long for law enforcement officers. They sent several units to be detained, but the gang managed to escape again. However, this time not all.
In July 1933, in another shootout with law enforcement officers, Buck and his wife Blanche were detained. Buck was wounded in the head and could not escape. A few days after his arrest, he died in hospital after surgery. Blanche hurt his eye. Since she could no longer run, they also managed to catch her.
The FBI took the matter seriously. They supplied the police on the ground with all the necessary information about the robbers. The feds knew that Clyde had lost 2 people. Bonnie was left crippled. It's time to arrest him. Clyde, on the other hand, also knew that sooner or later he was finished. He will not be imprisoned this time. The death penalty awaited him. Therefore, he did not want to surrender to the cops. He still had trump cards in reserve. He knew where to recruit people. And although he will still implement this plan, the feds and rangers will still be more cunning. The FBI created a roadmap by analyzing the gang's most frequent travel routes and already knowing what cars Clyde uses. In theory, they made approximate routes where the gang would pass. An operation of intensive hunting for robbers began, and Captain Frank Heimer was appointed in charge.
Captain Frank Heimer was a legend among the Texas Rangers. Among all of them, he was the toughest and strictest. He often told the new Rangers that the best way to legally deal with a criminal was to put more than 40 bullets in him.
And he followed this rule. He devoted most of his life to hunting criminals. He has 53 murders on his personal account. And that's not to mention the 17 bullets that hit him. And how many times he hit the gangsters is still unknown. Interestingly, several times he did attack Clyde's trail, even gave chase. It did not come to a shootout. Perhaps Clyde realized who he was dealing with, so he didn't want to confront them head-on. He knew his strengths perfectly well and skillfully used it.
Clyde's driving skills, which he used to the fullest, accelerating to 70 miles per hour, allowed him to escape almost any police ambush. Note that he performed all these tricks when a normal hydraulic braking system did not yet exist. If Clyde had been born later and was also interested in cars, then he would have been a racing champion.
Meanwhile, it is January 1934 outside. Clyde and Bonnie are still in hiding. There is practically no money left for subsistence. And Clyde decides to bring his long-standing plan to life, to free close friends from prison. This requires a riot in prison. Everything was thought out to the smallest detail, it remained only to get to the destination. In case of success, his gang would grow with loyal and strong members. It will be possible to rob banks and attack law enforcement officers openly. If the operation fails, Clyde will be executed. Bonnie will most likely suffer the same fate.
On January 16, 1934, Bonnie and Clyde staged a shootout at Texas State Prison Eastham. 5 prisoners escaped, shooting 2 law enforcement officers in the process. Clyde hid the weapons for them in advance in the agreed place. As they fled, Clyde covered them with machine gun fire from a Browning.
The implementation of the plan was successful. The friends were released, the gang was replenished, but it was not possible to continue the robberies. On May 23, 1934, they drove their Ford B8 down a country road in Bienville, Louisiana. The bandits did not suspect that Frank Harmer and 5 other officers had prepared the trap by sitting in the bushes. As soon as the car appeared on the horizon, law enforcement officers immediately opened fire. So the detention of robbers turned into execution. The shootout lasted only a few seconds, but during this time they put more than 150 bullets into the car. Bonnie and Clyde received about 50 bullets each. Their bodies resembled a sieve. This is the end of their story. In fact, before it began, hundreds of people gathered near the car. Everyone wanted a piece as a souvenir. It's the same story with funerals. Thousands of people came to say goodbye to folk heroes, gangsters, who were finally caught. Interestingly, their last will was never fulfilled. Bonnie and Clyde asked to be buried together.
My great-grandmother did not allow them to be buried together. She said that Clyde had been with Bonnie in life, so he would be with her in eternity.
As for the legislation and the upcoming gangster brawl in the United States, everything has changed dramatically. The FBI received expanded rights, which actually made it impossible for the successes of the criminal Romeo and Juliet to appear. Increased funding and improved working conditions for law enforcement officers brought them to the same level with criminals. There was no longer any need to confront Browning with a gun. And as for Bonnie and Clyde, their deaths were terrible and very fast. But the memory of them remained for a long time and has reached even today. Films and TV series are made about them, songs are written and theatrical scenes are staged.